fits into that category. You'd like to find out how you can be a part of the program? Well, why don't you drop us a line, address it to the Let's Talk program in care of Vaughan Radio, P.O. Box 195, Charlestown in Nevis. So give us a call. Our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Here's a suggestion. You got a question or a comment? Perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down so that when you're getting in the show, you're well organized and you take as little time as possible so that we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we will not accept anything we deem that's not within our broadcast standards. But we encourage you to always be forceful with your point. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community, thought that get results. And you can also follow us on our YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, Vaughan Radio, click subscribe. And also you can follow us on our Facebook page at Vaughan Radio for the video streaming of this program. Thank you again for joining us, your voice in the community, thought that get results. Tonight, Edric W. Stanley, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening to the people of St. Kitts and the people of Nevis, those who listen to us on the World Wide Web and throughout the Caribbean Basin. Webbo, this evening, of course, is another God-sent day, and I must say thanks to the Lord. Anyway, I have on my list the impact of COVID-19 regarding the children who studied online virtually during the pandemic. And I'm wondering if the statisticians can determine as to whether or not there has been a fall off in terms of the level of education and to what percentile amount the level has fallen to. In that regard, it would be good if we can get some information regarding the impact that the virtual method of educating our students regarding, again, the percentile amount. I'll leave it there, Webbo.
Conrad Dyer Liebert, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to my colleagues around the table, to the island people of Nevis, and to my friends in the international circle as well. My brethren in Connecticut, haven't heard you guys up for a while. I'm sure you still tune into this program, and it's going to be an interesting year, I suppose. So I know you would be there. Webbo, I thank you once again for inviting me here. I look forward to a healthy conversation tonight, Webbo.
Dr. Patricia Bartlett, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to my fellow panelists. I would like to just extend special greetings tonight to all who have managed to join us, whether you've joined us by Facebook or whatever medium you chose to join us tonight. Particularly, I would like to send some special greetings, though, to the people in the diaspora. Like Naya said, this is shaping up to be an interesting year, and they need to keep in tune with what is going on at home, and I'm glad to be a part of disseminating the information that is crucial to them making informed decisions. Since I'm on my special greetings list, I would like to say a good evening to Guy, who is in my constituency. Then, of course, my cousin Cynric in St. Kitts, my uncle in St. John's, my nephew in the US, and all the people who, in Nevis in particular, who are tuned in at this point in time. Thanks for the invitation to join you, Webbo.
Edric.
Yes, Webbo. Now, I made mention of that, and we would like to get some feedback on it seriously, because education, in my view, is the most important aspect of our lives, the most important in terms of preparedness. When preparedness coupled with opportunity, or when both meet, we should grab it with all hands. And once you have gotten a good foundational education, you are prepared to take on the challenges of what comes down the pipe. And therefore, education is key, in my view. Education is key. Therefore, I have brought that to the fore as my first topic on the table. And we should get some feedback. Again, let me reiterate. I need to know the impact that the virtual application as a result of COVID-19 has had on our students, whether Cape or as the case might be, six formers as the case might be. And the statisticians supposed to have information, and therefore we are open, this forum is open for our gathering and disseminating that kind of information. Hence, I appeal to the statisticians, whether they work for the Department of Education or the government. Let us know exactly what impact the virtual application or style learning has had on our students, and based on that, I would imagine that it was not as effective as face-to-face classroom teaching and learning. At the same time, it would have had an impact, and it should be quantified and catalogued, in my view. Must I go on, Webbo?
Well, it's interesting. I'm finally getting Mr. Stanley to come around to my way of thinking, because we must proceed logically when there are issues in the community. We ought to be able to study them. And, I've always been a proponent of that. So I welcome you, Mr. Stanley, to that way of thinking, and I'm glad that I had some influence on you finally.
Please, Pat, I cannot let this go unchallenged.
I'll give you the opportunity to.
Go.
Yes. But it's got to see, because that is fundamentally what I've been talking about all along. We need to get to that level of decision making that is based on data. You see, it might be important, for us to establish in the community those things that are necessary for us to study closely. Because in addition to that, and I support you in your call to get people to do a study on that, to find out what the impact would have been. Because I think there were different modalities that were used. There would have been online at some point, and then there would have been a hybrid type, online and go to school a couple of days on off, that kind of thing. And so that information is important for future reference. And coupled with that, though, I would like to see how many of those people who would have graduated from high school who would have gotten jobs. Because that, to me, is very concerning. I've met too many young men who have left school and they have not been employed. And I'm not blaming anybody, it is just an observation that I would have made. And it is critical for our development going forward. Because what I see happening is that a lot of these young people who leave in school, they seem not to have any hope at this point in time. And their ambitions seem not to be very apparent, let me put it that way. Because I speak to these kids and they're like, all they want is just a job. I was like, okay, well, what are you interested in? They say, right now, all I want is just to make some money. And I've met a few guys and all they wanted, they left high school and they're just thinking about driving truck, because for them, that's the only occupation right now, or any, that seem to be doing anything, significant to them, and they think that they'll be able to make big money that way. So I think, like I said, in addition to your concern, we ought to be able to find out the level of unemployment of these kids who are just now leaving school.
Well, like I've said, I cannot allow you to go unchallenged. Data, that is your forte, and you constantly ask for data. It doesn't mean that I have not been asking for it. At the same time, I have not amplified it, I have not categorized it, publicized it as much as you have, but everything under the sun has a barometer, and that barometer measures our age, our level of education, our level of understanding, IQ, and the whole 9 yards. So even though I have not, let me repeat, I have not uttered the word data as frequently as you, please do not think that I am not interested in data, and don't ever say, I'm glad that Stanley is now coming around, because I've always been around, and therefore I'm not going to allow you to get away with that tonight.
It's not going to be a back and forth on it. I just need to let you know that I was complimenting you. Right? That was just a compliment that I was paying you. that it was, yeah, it was good to see you, because too often I would, you would just throw out some figures. You would say, well, 90% of the people, and I would question you. Well, Stanley, how did you get to 90%? But now that once we recognize that there's a way to establish, there's a standardized way of doing things, you and I are on the same page. We're good.
We have been always on the same page. It's just that we might have had a difference of opinion, and it might be the bottom of the page, as the case might be. So you and I have always been on the same page.
Well, can I say just something? Yes, Stanley is a good thing, and that makes Pat happy and make us all happy, because sometimes data would give us the extent, because I'm sure one can say correctly that the kids, because we're talking about obviously primary, secondary kids, we're not dealing with the university levels right now, I suppose, and I think the kids have had a hard time really during this era, adjusting to it, and the teachers, I've spoke to a few teachers, and they've really been having a hard time, especially in the initial stages of it all. Probably things have improved, and I'm sure it has improved for both students and teachers as well, But if we look at it as a like the COVID era, we can also say that there has been a lot of sick leave for not just students but teachers also. You can be easily sent home by just showing some symptoms of whatever, whether COVID or just a fresh cold or whatever. So kids have been out of school a lot, and students as well. So it really have impact in a major way. To what extent, I suppose we'll have to wait for the data. But regardless, I think this is the way going forward to a great extent. I think it has made the kid a lot more ready for the 22nd century. And of course advancing and dealing with the modern technology that's available, so that in a sense is a good thing. Also, there's another dimension. What about those, even though Mr. Stanley says students, what about the people who have invested so heavily in students' accommodation, and because of the online learning, the students are not here? And there's great concern over on the other side. The people have invested heavily, and what is going on with them, I don't know. I'm not sure how much students, but I know that was a growing concern for some of the owners of those accommodations over there, and it makes me wonder, wow, heavy stuff for them really. And so I think if we look at it as an ever, it has really interrupt, the way the education flow, and of course the money that is made from education as it relates to those who have accommodated students. And so yes, Pat and Mr. Stanley, we probably should wait for the data just to get the extent of it, I suppose.
Well, I guess I'm not as optimistic as the guy. I don't see it coming anytime soon, but the call has been made, and I think maybe Stanley is a very upright citizen, and he pays his taxes and he demands that we get this done, and so I see no reason why they would not address that.
Well, we are now in the endemic phase, fortunately, of the abandon, or let's say the phasing out of the pandemic, and therefore we are in the endemic phase. As a result, we now have to look to our government for bringing us this far with reference to the type of rudimentary management, data collection, advice, and guidance. Hence, we are at a better place now in our overall history regarding the pandemic. Again, we are in the endemic phase, and I hope we will arrive at a much better place in the next 3 to 6 months, as the case might be. Praise the Lord. Webbo. Oh,
I just wanted to ask one question, and it came across my mind just the other day as we speak about COVID. But it was said that 2 field hospitals were supposed to come to the Federation, and 1 was to come to Nevis. Anybody know if they ever came to the Federation, or 1 came to Nevis?
Yes.
Who have information on that? Yeah.
Yes, we got ours.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
But as Stanley was talking about the pandemic, and we're now in a phase that is considered endemic, and we have to be careful though that we're not, maybe it is that we've had enough of COVID, because in other parts of the world it is still raging, and so we have to really be mindful of that. I don't know on what ground it would have been considered around here, because that it is endemic. But I guess it's just the way we treat it. But we have to, though, continue to monitor. We have to continue to do the surveillance, because if we have a surge again, we need to be able to pick that up early if we start getting a surge. And so I think it is important for some of the elements to remain in place and for us to continue to monitor our population through surveillance, serious surveillance, not just, just people walking into the hospital. I think that would be a prudent thing to do. And so I would encourage the authorities to consider that. Don't disband everything at this point. I'm hearing people, who are trying to suggest that maybe it's time for the task force work to be over. Maybe it is time to downgrade. But like I said, it is still raging in other parts of the world, and we have to keep a keen eye on what is going on around us. We don't want to prematurely call it endemic and start treating it like that, because we see, I don't know that we really have the capacity. It seems to me that we have not necessarily built the level of capacity that we should have during the period of time that we were waiting for something to happen here, and we still would not have been able to withstand a surge of the kind of magnitude that we are seeing in places elsewhere right now. I think in Singapore they're having quite a rough time with it right now, and so we have to be mindful of that. A pandemic really is a worldwide thing. It may be in some hemispheres you might be able to declare that it is endemic, but I think over a period of time we have to monitor it.
Well, based on the statistics that came out just recently, maybe it was here today, we had no COVID-related patient, or as the case might be. So we are getting there. Prior to now, 10 days, 20 days, a month, 5 months ago, we had numbers, and based on what I gathered, we didn't have any number today. So, or to date, let me put it this way.
Yes, but I just added a note of caution, just to suggest that because we're not doing routine random sampling of the population, we could still have it circulating and not have clinical cases. And some, we've seen surges before. We've seen different, in one time you hardly have any cases, and then all of a sudden it's that building when the Omicron variant came along, and it exploded. Luckily for us, it was a milder form of the COVID as we would have known it, but you recognize that we've had probably more deaths in a shorter period of time than we would have had for all the previous surges. But, not like we necessarily looking at the data per se and suggesting that it is, you could very well say, okay, it is over, and I'm just saying, adding a word of caution just to say we have to continue to do the surveillance that is necessary to keep us all safe.
You know, I'd like to join Dr. Bartlett in her, add to her word and make it words, you know, of caution. Because remember when we got to be careful how we package stuff. Remember when we started out with the 70%? And, you know, some of us thought that might be a little tricky. Well, you didn't know for sure, and then it turned out that way. So, because you see a couple of zeros, to suggest that for what purpose or gain, I don't know. It can turn out to be more harmful, you know, than not. The second point I wanted to make in form of a question. Anybody heard about the Omicron cousin?
Yes, I think I heard it.
Okay. They say that that's on its way. Well, it's there already in 74 countries and 27 states of the United States. And it is more difficult to deal with, seemingly, than the Omicron. So, you know, these are factors. And the truth is, most of the scientists, when they are explaining it, they put a qualifier. They don't know for sure as yet. And most of these things, you know, time is the healer of everything, you know. When you go to the doctor, why is it they're able to tell you, I'm going to give you 10 days sick leave and give you this medication for 10 days? Because they have studied the data, they have had past experiences to go by, and based on how the human body works. And that's why they're able now to tell you how long this COVID-19 stays around, and so on and so forth. But you cannot outwaste time. Time is the equalizer. So with this COVID-19, everybody wants it to go away right away. But the best answers they will have is over time. And what they did, even when they came up with the vaccine, they borrowed from the other diseases that they had before. And that is what happened. So I don't know. I mean, as Dr. Bartlett said, I join her to say, well, words of caution, you know, because I don't know what gain we will get just to begin to make people believe that the thing is gone and is zero. And then when you look, we're in a situation, again, expectation is a funny thing, you know. Right? So I just, wanted to make that point.
Like I mentioned last week, sometimes we don't have the time to, simply because we want to keep the program fluent.
Now you have enough time to make this particular point, though, so don't bore me that. because I only intervene when, right, Naya? He had enough time to make the point, so don't bore that. So I got you there or not?
No.
The answer is no.
No. Because Naya agrees with you doesn't mean that.
But Dr. Bartlett agreed too.
That doesn't mean that the majority is not
the majority does not rule with you.
Is not always, majority is not
always felt you will be a dictator.
Yeah, no.
Okay, let me ask you this: the majority does not always rule with you.
No.
Okay, sometimes the minority rule.
Well, based on my figuring out, I have my own conclusion, come with my own conclusion, and I could defend it tooth and nail.
But in this instance, you agreed with me.
Not when the three of them agree with you, putting me as if I'm wrong.
So I'm just saying. You work with me. So you agree with me, but not on the basis that Naya and Dr. Bartlett agreed.
Well, no, I don't attempt to change the subject matter.
I'm not changing. I ask you if you agreed with me. The answer is what? You
How can I
agree?
agree with you when you are on this? It's you in the same
So, that's funny.
because of my trying to say I didn't take the time, although you are telling me I had the time to cross the T's and dot all the I's.
So, in other words, what if you had the time, you would have made the point that I made.
Well, yeah,
Okay, so the answer is yes.
no.
You are a genius. The other area I would like to weigh in on, which you mentioned, with the education and the what's you call it?
Virtual learning.
Virtual, yes, the virtual learning. One of the things that will happen again over time is that as people get accustomed, they will begin to adjust. And I spoke to a friend of mine who had done some virtual working from home. And at the beginning they said they didn't really like it. And then after a while they mixed some in the office, some at home. And then I said, well, what do you like? And then they said, I actually like working from home. They began and they adjusted. And some of the things that they felt they couldn't do without, maybe associations and so on, and meeting people, the plus and the negatives, they put them together and I said, well, so over time again, you see, coming back again to the same factor, Edric, people adjust. So it's the same thing with the virtual learning. Now, I'm not saying that at this given time it's better than the in-house learning, but I'm saying that over time, you remember when we used to have the non-comprehensive system in terms of education, whereby when you got to 12 years old or 7th standard, you had to write an entrance examination. Mm-hmm. And if you pass, then you go on to high school. If not, then you finish up.
If they let you in.
If
the system is rigged, been rigged for decades.
What system is rigged? The comprehensive system?
Yeah.
So what do you mean? Some people get in before 12?
Yeah, well, obviously.
So okay, so that's
some getting even at 13, and some who passed didn't get in.
Talking about the previous system.
the previous system.
Well,
now it's compulsory.
When it was competitive, because
Yeah.
the thing is they had limitation as it related to space, so they had to make it competitive. That it doesn't make any sense carry everybody some who didn't have the capacity at that time, so.
So in other words,
time.
that's a given, because I challenge you, Mr. Stanley, to name a system other than that's not rigged.
We're human beings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I think though, as it related to the kids not being in school, for a lot of things I think have come out since people started to think in depth about the impact really, and I'm not measuring or presenting the data, but just to suggest that there are other things other than just how they would have matriculated, other than how they would perform on the standardized tests, coming out of COVID, to prove whether or not they retained anything, or those kind of things. But as it related to kids who couldn't get, who were getting supplemental meals in school, they were deprived of that. Even if you're home and you can't get food, you're not inclined to want to listen to teachers and all, that kind of thing. So I think it's a complex issue. And I guess they would segment the part that you want to study. They could do that by just looking at the scorecards from the kids. But as it relates to their development, the total development as a being, I think that would be a little more challenging. And so we had some kids who maybe missed out on the socialization, and then some kids who maybe became depressed for whatever reason, and some kids who were abused, who could not get that time away from home, who were left with parents who may themselves have been going through, stresses, and maybe sometimes took it out on the kids. So I think the isolation really created some issues for us, and over long term, I guess we'll be able to evaluate those. We might see maybe when kids start going back to school, well, they've gone back to school now, how well, they gel when they get back to school, how well they socialize, those kind of issues. So I guess over time, we would get more information as it relates to the total impact on the children, other than just their performance in standardized tests.
And no doubt then if they have to continue with that, then they'll make the necessary adjustments. For instance, the example you gave about the meals. Well, what a suggestion can be is to get the meals to the homes of the persons who need it,
right,
as the case may be. So it's just a matter of taking, and those people in life who can adjust to the changes the quickest are the persons who sometimes get ahead the fastest. And so it's just a matter, as I said, how you look at the changes and adjust accordingly. Now, I think you wanted to say something?
Not necessarily, Webbo.
Oh, okay. But so it's just a matter of how you adjust to the changes. And if we have the current situation and we just keep talking about, well, the way it used to be, and not appreciating there might be something out there that if you leave how it used to be, you might end up with something better, because it used to be that way, but the circumstances suggest that you just have to do the necessary adjustments, right? Who knows or who says that the way we used to do it was the best way anyway? And that is what changes and boldness is all about. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and I had occasion to say, there's a particular quotation which goes something like this: a ship in the harbor is safe, but that's not what it was built for.
True.
Yeah, you got to go out there in the deep waters, open seas, rough waves, and so on. That's why it was
Test
built.
its ability.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we have to remember too, as well, that homeschooling is not a new concept, People have been doing homeschooling, and so kids really didn't get a chance to interact with other kids. They stayed home, their parents or whomever was selected, to deliver or to help them with the school. That happens on a normal day in some places. We have gotten accustomed to the mass gatherings in terms of sending everybody to one school, and hardly any homeschooling goes on. So we have not really necessarily developed that kind of discipline here, and so our kids ought to, always have to be monitored. But kids are conditioned to do homeschooling. They have a schedule, and they do very well in standardized tests. From what the kids who I've interacted with, or the families that I know, engage in that practice. So sometimes it's just a matter of accepting, different things that could work, different concepts and stuff like that. And so homeschooling, maybe some people might want to go to that because, sometimes the kids get distracted in schools, and, sometimes the behavior after they socialize in school. Because I know some kids, before they go to school, they're well spoken. And by the time they go to primary school, you can't believe the same kids. It's like, but the interaction sometimes force that kind of thing. Because if they speak a certain way, the other kids, peer pressure, would laugh at them, and so they just fall in line. So I think there are benefits, either way. So we can't just be so rigid and say every child must go to school. We have to make provision for homeschooling as an option.
Well, that has always been an option, because I'm not saying here in particular, but the parents who religiously sit their children down and coerce them, influence them to absorb what is being taught to them, and as a result, if they truly understand the value, they would absorb it, and ultimately it would be beneficial to them. So homeschooling has always been a part of the upbringing and the nurturing, guiding, and ultimately bringing them to adulthood.
No, but I'm not so sure. Maybe Naya might know a little bit more about it, because I'm not so sure what the laws, speak to here. But at some point I got the impression that kids must go to school.
Yes.
So I don't know if any provision will be made in our laws to
I'm just saying
acknowledge the fact that people might want to do their own homeschooling.
Yeah, that's.
So if we're not yet at that level, maybe that is a consideration that we should have going forward. In that some people might want very well, to handle, teaching their own kids at home. But I know at one point you had to go to school, or else the truancy officer would come around looking for you if you didn't,
But I think it's something to do with the future. I believe it's the future. I believe that more of that would be taking place going forward, and everyday school might be something that become less and less used, in a sense. To me, it tends to prepare the kids more to to apply themselves to the technological advances that's happening around them, really. It instill also, we ask of them to be self-motivated in a sense. I mean, if they're home, what has been happening during the pandemic? Kids have been home and they're not monitored in any way, and mom and dad gone to work, and so we ask of them to be more disciplined. On achieving that, I suppose it's worthy to be noted, really. It's one thing to be always going to school and the teachers behind you, forcing you, and that works for some people as well. As Pat said, it's quite a mixture of things, and we cannot just forget those. And of course, here in Nevis and many of the third world countries, not everybody have internet, and of course the tablets has been provided, but parents struggling to keep the internet on, boy, at times, so it's all these type of things we probably need to take into consideration. But I think it's really the future, really, and I think the kids would be better prepared to apply themselves to modern day technology as it relates to learning, if that exercise is adapted more.
Well, it's all based on the level of education parents have and the desire for them to guide their children, and it's far and few between. Those, based on affordability. It's based on affordability, and it's based on the level at which that home reaches with reference to focusing on getting your children educated. There are times when you take the horse to the water, but you just can't make it drink.
But here's the point. Here's the issue, though. Here's the thing. If you're going to make a transition to something else, you're going to look at the pros and the cons and the challenges, and you're going to put the necessary infrastructure in place to address it. Now, if you decide that you're going to go to this online learning, and Dr. Bartlett or somebody had mentioned, I mean, the socialization, that's going to be an issue. So you get the kids socialized by a different method. Maybe at afternoons they come out to a boys club or girls club or whatever and so on and so forth. That's part, and that's for the socializing aspect of it, right? So I mean, I understand what you're saying, but if you're going to, and then if you're going to go through that, you'll address it, right? And the other point is that in terms of the education and talking about who, which parents are up to date and so on and so forth, here's a question. Do you think that even at this stage we are keeping a pace with the technology in terms of our education system and policies?
Yes.
Oh, really?
I think so.
You think so? Okay.
It may not be quantified as expected when you make a comparison with other jurisdictions. But I could tell you there are Nigerians here who can match anybody out there.
Yeah, but you got a question, no?
What you said is that you don't think that we are at the level. I'm not giving you the same words.
Keeping a pace.
Well, keeping pace with, and I'm saying to you, our numbers may not be up there.
Dr. Bartlett, tell her keeping a pace with what? Tell him keeping a pace, because he think I said keeping a pace with the outside world. So tell
No,
him.
not well.
Okay, what? Keeping a pace with what?
With what is expected in terms of, well, I still got to go outside, but if you want to keep it in-house, keep it in Nevis.
Would you agree?
Keep it in St. Kitts Nevis. Then you use the numbers we got here, the people we got here, the training, and
Would you agree, Mr. Stanley, that the best way to solve a problem is to first know what it is?
sure,
Would you agree that the best way to answer a question
is to understand it.
is to first know what the question is?
Quite so.
Okay.
But sometimes I've done it over a number of years, especially when I was in primary school. The teacher infers, and you pick up the inference, and
then you get it wrong.
no,
But that's okay, Dr. Bartlett, because when he gets it wrong, he will tell you it's right. And although the answer is yes, he will insist is no. The answer is no. So, Edric is a superstar. So anyway, same question, Naya. I just asked a question open. Do you think that we're keeping a pace in terms of our, education system and the adjustments to the technology?
No, I don't think so.
Technological advances?
No, I don't think so, Webbo. Don't think so at all. Otherwise, this exercise of home learning might have been an easier process. The schools might have been more equipped. But all the schools are not truly equipped as it relates to modern day classrooms and so forth. But no, the answer is no.
The answer is no. Why did I ask the question so that the answer could be no? Dr. Bartlett, what do you think?
Well, I have no way of measuring it as to whether or not we are, but just from observation, it seems to me that we could be doing better. However, at the end of the day, I think we measure the learning outcomes, so we're yet to see the outcome. And I think once you're within, as Stan would say, a certain parameter, you should be good. But I definitely think that we could do better. I know that some families had challenges as related to having devices, because I know that personally I had to help, through a friend of mine, I had to help out some families, at least 5 families, to get devices. So there are challenges, and then I would have heard about some teachers who were not necessarily equipped. and they themselves had some technical issues, that maybe they could not, in the short period of time, couldn't be there, but they had to work through those. And so it was not at the optimum from what I understand, So I guess there's work to be done to get us all ready, get us to that level. Because if you're going to ask people to do homeschooling, well, not homeschooling, but to do hybrid or whatever you want to call it, then I think that we ought to have all the equipment in place. We ought to have everybody trained at a certain level. And then, of course, the issue of the children being monitored again is something else, because when you leave kids at home by themselves, and I don't know if the law allows you to leave your children at home under a certain age, so all those technicalities I think would have to be worked out, and better supervision. From what I understand, some kids, they were smarter at using the devices than maybe the teachers, and so they would turn off certain elements on and may not have benefited in totality from what they could have. So we have some work to do, and the schools, I think we need to pay more attention to equipping the schools and outfitting them so that they could come up to speed, because I don't think what is going on in the school, that is just based on hearsay. Let me just admit that. It's just based on hearsay, because I have not been able to go into the schools myself to see the deficiencies that exist. But it seems as if that there are deficiencies that ought to be addressed, may not have been addressed as speedily as they should have been. And so we're yet to see, after Stanley's study is done, the end result of that, or the impact that would have had.
You see, again, this thing was a broad and loaded question, in that even with the structure, and I'm talking about the policies and how we teach and stuff like that. I think a couple of years ago, maybe less than 5 years ago, I remember one of the bosses at the CXC came out and gave a scathing evaluation of the whole system. And notwithstanding, they were putting out students passing 20 subjects and 15 and all these things and stuff like that. He made the revelation that the kids are not able to analyze and so on. And I thought that's interesting, because this is the premier body responsible for these things, and then he is making these things, but what are they doing about it? And that is what I'm saying. The methods and so on that we're using are to keeping the pace, because how challenging it is, for instance, for the kids to be using the same methods that we used when we were going to school, to juxtapose it in the technological system. You see what I'm saying? So the question is, are we keeping a pace? Or I don't know what they do in school still, if the methods that they use in teaching are still the same methods, etc., and whether or not they have concluded that they're at this point in time still the best to bridge towards the technological advances.
Well, do you think there are people within our society who think outside the box?
Of course. Are you not a member of the society?
Well, I'm just saying to you. And a few names, well, let me say, maybe one name in particular.
To the question I just asked, the answer is one.
I still would tell you,
The question I asked was, are you not a member of the society?
Quite so.
So then the answer is one.
Webbo, let me just put it this way. For me, I have a certain level of intellect. Doesn't mean I'm the brightest fellow around here. But there are people who...
What level of intellect do you have?
Well, let me again defer that question or duck that question. But let's pick up on a fellow like Roger Williams. he was just an intelligent fellow. He is just an intelligent fellow. And at a certain level, he'll compete with anybody here and elsewhere. Our numbers may not be as big in terms of other places, but because of our small population, we can pick one or two, as the case might be, and place them anywhere.
That's an example of what you told me earlier that you are good at. A person asking a question and you just answer something else.
Well, I understand what I understand, depending on how the question is put to me.
No,
And
but
I answer.
I'm asking you if that's an illustration of when you said to me earlier that a person may ask you a question. You know they do that in the United States. They have talking points and they prepare the candidate or the person and they say no matter what question is asked of you on this particular topic, this is the answer, this is what you say. So are you employing that at this juncture?
No.
So the answer is no.
To what?
Are you employing that strategy at this juncture?
Well, no. There are times when you formulate a question based on how you conceptualize the question, and you have in your own mind the answer to it. Doesn't mean that what somebody tells you or what somebody trying to get you into is where you're supposed to go.
Okay. Let me get a break. This is Thought That Get Results with Edric W. Stanley, Conrad Naya Liebert, Dr. Patricia Bartlett. Your phone calls when we come back on 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. We'll be back after these.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. Builders Paradise has over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Wow! Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. This is something that you can't refuse. Visit Builders Paradise today at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in St. Kitts or call them at 466-4938.
With all the power from the tower, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, VON Radio, from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Back on this episode of Thought That Get Results. If you'd like to join in the conversation, the discussion, 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. I'd like to ask on another note, what are your thoughts? Anybody think that we in these islands should be concerned about the conflict that's going on, Russia and so on?
Well, we had the program last week, and Wednesday, the program is on Tuesday, Wednesday, CARICOM made a policy statement. I do not know if we gave them the lead from Von Radio, the Michael Von Radio. But at the same time, Naya believes that there wouldn't be a war. It has not gotten to a full-fledged war, but at the same time, based on what is happening there, Putin is bent on re-establishing the Union of Soviets, of Socialist Republics. And as a result, he is not going to back away. He has tactically moved his troops onto the borders of Ukraine. And little by little, he is moving in because he has his own concept as to what he wants to achieve. NATO, which was formed as a result of Germany in the last World War, is there to deter him. Is he being deterred? He's still bent on attempting to accomplish his objective by re-establishing the Union of Soviets, of Socialist Republics. As a result, shots already start firing simply because 2 people died. He is not going to back away because, again, the West is trying to deny him the taking of Ukraine. He feels Ukraine is an integral part of the Soviet Union. And as a result, he may not stop at taking Ukraine. Hungary, Czechoslovakia, those are places that he would like to bring back into the fold of the Union of Soviet, of Socialist Republics. It depends on the approach the West takes. Now, it is believed that Ukraine would ultimately survive. Putin doesn't believe that Ukraine would survive based on what he wants. As a result, he is attempting to do what his predecessors, Yeltsin, Mikhail Gorbachev, and all the other leaders of Russia couldn't accomplish, because the Union of Soviet was dismantled under Gorbachev. Where we are in history, Germany was divided, and when West Germany survived and East Germany was still in the Soviet bloc, when they realized that things are happening in a positive way, in a forward way, they decided they want to join West Germany, and they did. So Germany became united again. So where we are in this chess game, Putin is not going to back down simply because his objective is to bring back or re-establish the Union of Soviet, of Socialist Republics. And he will get the credit if he succeeds. He will get the blame if he doesn't. NATO must deny him his objective. So based on what is happening now, he has now created a situation. He cannot save face. He cannot back off. And he will not back off because the prize is big, and at the same time, it would be a part of his legacy as the leader of the Soviet Union. So that's my take for now. I might come back in a little later.
Well, Webbo, you asked the question if we have any concerns in terms of if we can be affected by what's going on in Russia. It's hard for me to say, Webbo, but the sanctions unleashed on Russia to a great extent financial base. And we have our financial service and so forth, and it looks to me like America is going to dig up every bit of dirt or anywhere on earth to find where Russians are putting their money. Same thing with the Prime Minister of England. The sanctions are to a great extent financial base, and so we have our wings spread pretty wide with our financial service and our passports and so forth. So there could be some kind of impact, maybe minimal, but I mean, if the conflicts continue and war break out, then it's almost like a world war, isn't it? So we will be impacted. We are very much closer to war than last week, it sounds like, because I believe the West was expecting Putin to say different things, really, but what he has said, to acknowledge the independence of two countries in the east of Ukraine, is almost a gateway into Ukraine. That has been said. And yes, it can be quite dangerous, really. Now, a lot has been said about him simply declaring the independence of these countries. And sometimes we in international politics, there's a lot of crazy thing going on, really. That seems crazy, and America is highlighting that fact. But then America did look at Venezuela and put a president in place by just saying, well, he's the president, and the really elected president wasn't favored by America. And so, yes, we see crazy things going on across the world. We are at in all this, Webbo. I hope there ain't no war, because I'm on about, preventing human suffering, to be quite honest. I really want to know what's at stake, I find Biden was walking really fast, as if he's hurrying up things in a speedy way. He likely want the war more than anybody else, for what reason, I don't know. It makes me ask, where's Hunter Biden? Because previous to the American election, the Bidens, it was said, have interest in energy company, and so forth, and I wonder if that have anything to do with it. Biden is trying to impose sanction, even against the wishes of the Ukraine leader. He was trying to tell them, hold off a little bit, but he have changed his tone, because he have now called up the retired army man them and start training them as if he's totally convinced now that it's going to happen, even though he said that he don't believe that it would happen, but he is preparing his people for it. It's a sad situation, really, to be quite honest, because we're in the midst of a pandemic, man. You know what I mean? And to impose human suffering on people who simply doesn't understand at times what's at stake, but they are become the tug of war in the conflict and suffers tremendously, when these things happen. But there's a rush, from the West to protect Ukraine. And Russia is simply saying that nobody is considering their concern, which is their security. He doesn't want NATO to be too far in the east. And it looks as if, that relationship with Ukraine also gives NATO a gateway into the east. So it's a balanced thing to me. I don't just get up and take side. I watching them. I wish they can just behave themselves and prevent, human suffering in this era of a global pandemic, and quite an unsettled situation throughout the globe. I mean, Biden ratings are down. You know, I don't know. This probably would do something to improve it. I hope so. But does it worth it in the end, really? You know, to put so much people, displaced people, and all this. I blame these people, and I wonder if this is not just a play, you know, because they're talking to each other still, you know. Diplomacy, engage in diplomacy. Everybody's asking for diplomacy. Well, just sit down and talk and figure out the thing, no? You know, and it can be done. It can be done. Everybody said they don't want war, but every day it seems like it move closer to war, you know. They have the handle. They can prevent the war. Generally, I don't think the people know what's at stake. Nationalism, whatever it is. But Mr. Stalin is saying that Putin wants to bring back the Soviet. That is totally impossible. It's not possible.
Tell him.
It's not possible. And I believe Putin knows his limitation. Putin knows his limitation. And the fact that he recognized two countries as independent countries in Ukraine. Does that mean he recognized Ukraine too as an independent country? I say no more, Webbo. I'm not sure if I'm...
Well, Webbo, my contribution really would be a little different, taking, you know...
Let me take this first, Dr. Bartlett, and then we'll come to you. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes, good evening. Good evening to you, Mr. Webbo. Good evening to your panel. Now, I have a question for you. This is talk that get results, and I'm hoping that I can get some results on this one. Now, last year, the government put solid waste on the water bill. And I was told by one of the ministers that it's supposed to be effective from October. But that was on the bill since July month. However, I happened to be off island for like 5 months. I was off island. I left island since June, came back in December. In December, in around September, I asked a friend to check on my bill. My bill was like over $100 and something, and I was kind of curious. So when I started investigating, then is when I was told that the solid waste bill was put on the water, right? So I went on to ask the question if I can have a waiver on the bill. They told me yes, I can send an email asking for a waiver. That was since October. Okay, October passed, November, December. I haven't gotten any. I came back the 14th of December. Mine, solid waste hasn't been picking up no garbage for me because I'm not there. Almost 5 months, the whole of December, no garbage was being picked up. I came back in December, no garbage picked up in December. January, I called the manager of solid waste, and he asked me to give me Mr. Brown number to call Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown then told me that, okay, he's going to show that the guys picked up the garbage. Now my question to you is, and like I would ask two things. If I can have a waiver for my bill that I didn't pay, because this crunch time. Nobody should be paying for a service that they did not receive. I left here. Flo usually do it. When you're ready to leave, you tell them when to disconnect, and when you come back, they ask you to send an email like 3 days before for them to reconnect your service, and you paid for what you used, right? Up to now, I had not gotten any call from solid waste. I sent an email, I haven't gotten. So, knowing that you are talks that get results, I am hoping that I can get some results here. Two things is to get a waiver for something that I didn't use. I hadn't had any service for 5 months. Because remember, the ending part of December, nobody picked up my garbage. I even sent a picture to the manager telling them, look, my garbage is here. The entire December, and no garbage was being picked up. So I would like to get that money off my bill that I didn't use for the service. And if the government can implement a form assisting the public, or I should say the community, that if you're you're going overseas, that you're able to sign to say, well, okay, I'm not be here, and you shouldn't be billed for garbage. No, I don't have a problem paying for something that I use. But when you didn't use something, I think you should be able to waiver that. Okay? So I'm just hoping that I can get some results on those two things.
The case seems like a specific case. You said you were having some correspondence initiated with the solid waste people?
Yes.
Okay. Now, here, work with me. Here's what I suggest. I'm not so sure about the latter part because that sounds like a policy thing to me, and that perhaps might take some more, discussion and wheeling and so on, changing the policy. But on the particular case that you're speaking about with the correspondence, and you said that you addressed the manager and you didn't get any response and so on, what I can say is, who is the minister responsible for that, Edric? Sorry, Mr. Branny in here, so he can write. Solid waste. Who's Premier?
Health.
No, June.
I think they're
Under health.
Yes,
So
Williams.
so the Premier.
It's under health, but Ms. Williams would be the minister who is
Okay.
responsible for
Who is the El Jefe? The Premier?
the premier.
Okay, so what's no, well, you don't have to give your name, but caller.
Yes.
So I suggest, having done that, you know the Premier?
I think I know him, yes.
Okay. Well, you call his secretary and tell them that you would like to have a meeting with the Premier and put that case to him.
Okay.
All right? Because having done what you said that you done, and you got no response, that doesn't seem to me like that's fair. So ask to speak to the Premier, and let's see what happens from there on that particular case.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a good evening. Okay. Dr. Bartlett, I think it's to come back to you.
Well, yes, I just wanted to make a short input as it relates to the question that you asked and the impact that I wanted to address that. I think out of this whole thing, and I agree with Naya, I don't like to see human suffering, and I am hoping that this disruption doesn't happen. I'm hoping that Ukraine doesn't get overtaken by the Russians. But for us here in the Caribbean, I think our vulnerability has been laid bare. For most of the Caribbean, CARICOM countries, particularly us, because I kind of like to relate to things that are happening to other people. Because coming out of the possible economic disruptions, and we are talking about the impact that this would have on energy, because when you look at the activities or the economic activities in Ukraine, if they were to be taken over by Russia, and Russia hoards those resources, and they're not honoring trade between, well, at that point they probably would not be doing trade anyway, because everybody in Europe would have some economic measure that is levied against Russia, and so they probably would not be doing business with them. And so all of the resources that are now in Ukraine that normally would filter out through trade to Europe would be impacted. We're talking about energy in particular,
Okay,
and that
Bartlett.
concerns me.
Yeah, I'll let you finish. Thank you for holding. Go ahead. Yes, thank you. Yes, go ahead,
Mr.
please.
Webbo.
Yes, please.
Sorry, like calling in. Putting something on the table. I want when Mr. Politics bring this to them. Why the leader of Team Unity trying to bring down system, supporting him NRP. And also have a Spanish fellow up here, a campaign for, we put it on the table with when Mr. Culture and Mr. Politics call him.
Well, could you go over that again?
I said I wanted to put this question to Mr. Politics, Mr. Culture. Why the leader of Team Unity trying to bring down CCM, supporting NRP, trying to supporting NRP to bring down CCM?
Okay.
Can have people campaign up here against CCM.
Okay, so you said you are putting that question to Mr. Politics and Mr. Culture. That Carter, you're still there?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm asking for you said that you're putting that question to Mr. Politics and Mr. Culture.
Yes.
Okay, all right. I got you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Bashi.
So, yeah, that was a light moment. So I was thinking about, and I would have heard it laid out, you know, and I think I got I saw something on Facebook, I think, of all the different resources that are coming out of Ukraine that feeds into particularly the European Union. You know, so they are dependent on them for energy sources, different types, the coal, from coal to gas to, you know, you name it, you know. And the implication is, if we cut off that supply from from Europe, what does that mean? What does it mean for us here? It means that they now would be seeking in the same markets that we are now seeking to buy from. And usually they have the biggest purse, because we would have seen that even when we had COVID, that everybody who had money would have taken up all of the vaccines, and we didn't get any until someone decided, okay, well, you know, I'm going to give you a little. So that is one of the things that we have to keep our eyes on, because if fuel become any more expensive than it already is, because I already paying an extra $20 just to fill up my tank. Over what I used to about a couple months ago, you know. And if fuel becomes any more expensive, we're going to feel it here. And people who are now complaining about electricity bills, it's going to be even higher. It means that our energy is going to be much more unaffordable from the average Kittian and Division. And I think, and that is why I say our vulnerability has been laid bare, because we have had so much time as it relates to focusing on putting in place renewable energies, or harnessing the renewable energy in our jurisdiction, so that we are not so much dependent on fossil fuel. We have taken that for granted, and it could come back to haunt us or hurt us in a big way if this invasion, you know, proceeds. And of course that has something to do with our food security as well, because just like the energy sources or resources that are being harnessed in the Ukraine and shared with the rest, you know, with Europe, so too is food. Because from what I understand, it is almost as if Ukraine is the food basket of Europe. That is where most of them get a lot, you know, of their food from. And so if that pressure is brought to bear on our food sources, because remember that we are overall net importers as it relates to food, we have still, that again is going to make us very vulnerable. And food is going to be more expensive for our people, and we're going to be even more food insecure.
Okay, let me take this. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, Webbo.
Good evening.
Good evening, Dr. Bartlett. Good evening, Mr. Stanley, and good evening, Nayo.
Good evening.
I just heard a caller say he asked in Mr. Culture and Mr. Politics a question. Well, let me answer that caller.
Which one are you?
I am Mr. Culture,
Okay.
the radical one.
Okay.
I am not a PRO for no political party. I am an adjuster. ANJUSTR. And when you say that, I adjust wrong, which I condemn wrong. I adjust right, which I uphold righteousness. But my question back, I'm gonna answer him with a question. Do you have facts presented to me, to Webbo and the team? Good evening, Webbo.
Okay, thank you. Stanley, yes.
Well, Russia has been preparing for this eventuality for a long time. They've got roughly 600 billion stashed away. They've got an enormous amount of oil, and oil is now escalating in terms of price on world market. They got nickel, uranium, palladium, a host of natural resources. And like I said, they've been preparing for this eventuality. So sanctions against them, economic as the case might be, they have already calculated that they could withstand a certain amount of pressure from these sanctions. But the bigger prize is for the re-establishment of the USSR. And Putin is not going to back down simply because he has made preparations, he has made calculations, and ultimately he is going to go forward, and no matter what Biden says, no matter what NATO says, he is calculating that if he's lucky, he will succeed. As a result, I wish him not success. I hope he fails. This is a sovereign country, and you have gone this far to invade a sovereign country. Why are they going to wait? Why are they going to wait?
Okay, I'll get back to you. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, Webber, and the whole panel.
Good evening.
I give you show a A+ tonight. Good topic, good discussion. Please don't let those people from St. Kitts tie you up tonight. Another guy gonna call back, and then politics and call back. Tell them we don't do these things in New York. Any of the guy call back? No, we don't do that. But the show tonight is very education-wise. The education about Russia and all of those things. So, they're listening. Bye, good night.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make a point, because to point out, to highlight something rather, because sometimes I think we have certain discussions and we say a lot of things loosely, because we don't have the time sometimes to go in depth. So I just wanted to point out as we discuss the effects of war and how we can be prepared for it and stuff like that. There's a phrase that says nobody wins a war. But I want to make a point. Let me take this though. Good evening. Thank you for holding. Okay, I'm very sorry. Could you please try again, call back? I just wanted to make the point that it is very difficult. The caller is back, so let's see. Good evening. Thank you for holding. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Sister Mika, what the lights is for Monster Village
Yes.
in a fixator?
Right. I think that they said, though, to be fair, that area will take a little a little more time than the other areas. So to be fair, give them a little time, okay?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Have a good evening. Right, so we're going to give them a little time, but remember, it's not forever, right? So still work on it. Okay, so I was making the point, though, that nobody wins a war, and the islands will suffer because even as we make the point that if we had geothermal or wind and so on and so forth, right, that won't solve the problem. Here's the question in relation to that. We don't make the engine parts. So what if, you know, the engine for geothermal or the wind turbines and so on, what if they go and you have a blockade and so on and so forth? You still can't get the parts, right? So it is a difficult, I just wanted to make the point that is very difficult. So it's not just, okay, you're not going to get oil or you're not going to get gas. Right? It's a lot more involved when you start to look at the harsh reality of it. I think I interrupted Mr. Stanley. Will you finish?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Webbo, Putin went to China, and he and Xi Jinping are now in a relationship against the West. When Trump was running, Trump made sure he didn't criticize or say anything against Putin because he knew exactly what Putin's master plan was. As a result, he fought tooth and nail to ensure that he stays in the presidency, but he failed. He failed miserably, and as a result, had he been in the presidency, Putin would have swept through, just like what Germany did in the last World War. Fought back by Britain with desperate courage. But all those Western countries, hundreds of square miles, had fallen into German hands. Putin is attempting to do the same by invading Ukraine and taking on Czechoslovakia. All of them are in the crosshairs of Putin's gun, and it must not happen. It shouldn't allow to stand. Praise the Lord that God saw and we got Trump out of there. Biden is not doing very well simply because of whatever it is. His ratings are just as low as Trump's. But he has been given a difficult hand to play. But he's playing it well. And all the European countries should begin to line up against Putin. The Chancellor of Germany, Scholz, has decided that the pipeline which would supply Europe, including Germany, the most vulnerable on Russian energy, is off the table. I mean, has not been decided upon, and they have put it in abeyance indefinitely. I hope that that portion of it would deny Putin the resources, economic resources, he wants from the oil that's going to flow from Russia to Eastern and West Germany, Eastern and Western Europe. Webbo. We will be affected, you know. We will be affected. He still has 2 supersonic jets, fighter jets, in Venezuela. Trump should have made sure that those fighter jets were sent back to the Soviet Union. But Trump and Putin were two peas in a pod, hoping that he could turn the United States into a dictatorial or autocratic country.
Webbo, can I ask Stanley a question? How the two fighter jets in Venezuela is going to affect us? How you anticipate that happening?
They are going to target United States.
Two fighter jets? Two fighter jets going to take...
Well, no, here.
All right.
But
All right, Stanley. All
the
right.
longest journey begins with the first step. And I'm saying to you,
But we're reasonable, though.
These guys are warmongers, man.
I'm saying to you,
Stanley,
those two fighter jets,
Stanley, be reasonable. Be reasonable.
you think,
Look at the impact it's going to have on us. Well, I think I glean from Webbo that maybe people around here probably might have I really appreciated your discourse as it relates to the ambitions of Putin and all the rest of it, or what you think his ambitions are. But as it relates to the impact that's going to have on us, we need to start thinking and planning for it. And I know Webbo was discounting the fact that if we had new renewable energy, we might have been in a better place. You didn't exactly say that, but I would challenge you on that. In that, yes, we may have issues with parts, but I'm not so sure that our parts necessarily would end up coming from that channel. But those are things that we need to start thinking about, our sustainability and our place in the world. And we are too dependent, and I think that is what the point I was trying to make, is that we are too dependent on the outside world. And so if someone sneezes all the way in China, we feel it right here. Wherever there's a disruption, we're likely to be impacted in a negative way. And we've already gone through 2 years, 2 lean years of COVID, where people have been struggling. And if this were to happen, then it is going to be pile on. And what we've seen, and maybe some of you have not been able to see it, but on the ground, I've been interacting with some people who have been impacted in a negative way as it relates to the economic impact of the COVID. And that would be pile on. And my submission a while ago was just to suggest that had we been in a better place as it relates to securing our energy, especially electricity, because if we were 100%, we were on 100% renewables as relates to producing for our electricity needs, then we would be less dependent on the outside world, and whatever fuel we had to bring in for our cars or trucks and stuff like that to keep the economic engine running would be less of an impact, I would think, on us as a people, and economic impact, because poor people are going to get even poorer. It is likely that poor people could get even poorer. And as it relates to our ability to secure foods, to meet our nutritional demands, it's not just food security, but it's nutrition security as well. I don't know that we are well placed in terms of producing most of what we need to sustain ourselves. And we need to take those two issues very seriously in St. Kitts and Nevis.
but we are not isolated. Even though we are on an island, we are not an island unto ourselves, meaning we have put ourselves in this position and we can't turn back. We are on this global conveyor belt and we all attempting to go into the same direction, meaning, do you want to be able to sustain ourselves just by going back 50 years?
Who is proposing that?
No, I'm saying to you,
what have I said to suggest that that we should
in
go
order
back
for you to
50 years?
be sustainable, although you want to plan for the future, you still have to go with the rest of the world in terms of having computers, having a nice house, having cars.
So what did I say to suggest that we're going to be
let's do this. Let's do this. Mr. Stanley, go ahead, and then Dr. Batley.
We have to understand where we are on this conveyor belt of the world, and as a result, we have to put things in place as a minus third world country so that we are able to go forward, but we cannot enjoy the nicer things of life. We have to pay a price for it. And in that regard, We don't have the resources. We're not a rich country, so we have to take it baby steps at a time. Baby steps at a time. And therefore, we can't be up there like the big boys. Sure, tell me what it takes, but you tell me what it takes for us to become sustainable.
Dr. Bartlett.
I think Mr. Stanley maybe missed what I said. Because what I'm trying to suggest, and I just took two issues as it relates to our sustainability, and it was one as it related to energy. And my submission was that if we were to eliminate our total dependence on the outside world, then we would be less vulnerable. If we were to harness the resources that we have as it relates to wind and solar energy, then it would mean that we would be importing less fossil fuel. Simple. It's not a matter that the big boys are up there. Everybody is trying to pursue renewable energy because it's cheaper. It's cheaper energy. You say that we are minus third world. I don't understand that category that you've assigned us to, but I accept it for the argument's sake. But if we are there, it means that we must start doing things to conserve the little reserve that we have. Because we have almost everything we have to import. We are net importers. So it means in Sabre, they're doing renewable energy, almost 100% renewable energy in terms of their electricity needs. In Statia, they're doing similar. In Barbados, they're doing. In St. Kitts, they're proposing to. Where are we? And so that is just what I'm trying to suggest to you, Mr. Stanley, that we don't have to depend on fossil fuel totally. I'm not trying to suggest that you must put on your car and get a donkey cart. All I'm saying is then when we import fuel, then we will be importing less fuel than we are now. Did I make a point that you could understand?
I do understand your point, but what I'm trying to say.
Before you do that, Naya, you wanted to get in?
Just to say, Webbo, yes, we have not been doing much on renewable energy, something we should seriously start to consider in a serious way. But I see attempts have been made as it relates to food security. They just planted 8,000 food trees up in Indian Castle. It's a good thing the agriculture minister is doing there. I commend him on that. Want to see even more. I think that's a gesture because things are not going to turn around overnight. Things are going to turn around overnight. Mr. Stanley always said the longest journey begins with the first step, right? But it's the consciousness we are talking about here, and not just being conscious of it. Putting that consciousness to work. Of course, we are doing things here on island, like all the homes that's being built. So it probably can be a consideration of new renewable energy to run these homes. Nothing is wrong with that. Nothing is wrong with that. That is where we expect to go, really. But as it relates to food security, I see attempts have been made, and I hope it continues in a big way, because things are not going to turn around overnight. And what we have to realize that the things we put in place today, maybe it impacts 20 years from now. And so we got to think more long term too. We got to think more long term and understand that government is continue. Government has continuities, that characteristic feature of governments. And so Nevis is Nevis, Nevis doesn't own by the NRP, NANO, CCM, or the other one, or even NIA. Nevis is Nevis, and when we do things, even though we do not live to see the fruition of these things, we should do it still, because it will eventually contribute to the betterment of Nevis. Small steps must start to be taken. The consciousness is there. It's all around us. People talking about renewable energy, eco-friendly systems. We want to see something start moving here in Nevis, in a physical sense, because everybody knows about it, and everybody. It's not an argument anymore. We should be moving towards renewable energy, and just so we have made steps toward food security. I'm so happy about that, really. we should be putting things in place in a very serious way, because St. Kitts doing it down there. You know, why not Nevis?
Well, let me see if I could answer Naya. Webbo brought to the fore the fact that to have what is known as the geothermal plant, power's got to come from outside.
Yeah. Yes.
Having those turbines, the windmill over there at that estate, Madden's.
Wind turbines.
Wind turbines. They provide electricity for the grid.
Yeah.
At the same time, we don't make them. We have to import them. People got to be skilled in order to keep them
running.
That
is true.
Solar panels. Anybody's making solar panels around here? No. All we are dependent on imports. What our food bill is currently, if you go to Rams and ask them what the import bill is, they'll tell you it is massive. Although we're making a dent in the food security arrangement. Just a dent. Agriculture is not at the level where it should be, because most of our people see that as slave work, and as a result, they don't want to go back to that. Fortunately, the drip system, hydroponic farm system, is technology which is imported, and it will work well, but the percentile level, is it there yet? It's far from there. So we have to continue to do what we have to do, but you have to be able to understand the sacrifices when you begin to bring to the fore the way we live, sustainable, wanting sustainable existence. You have to make sacrifices, and the sacrifices I'm seeing, we are not prepared to go back to donkey cart, wearing bamboo shoes, as the case might be. But our population is dependent on current times, and as I say, we are on the conveyor belt of the world, and therefore we have to be able to think outside the box in order to do things different and come forward with new things, new ideas, in order to get us out of this quagmire. But there's a price. Venezuela provides the fuel for us, for our cars, for our power plant, and the government that is in place is still working with us, still working with St. Kitts and Nevis with reference to the energy, the oil we get from Venezuela. But that's not all. We have to be able to understand where we are in the world and play our part. And we just can't change the game. You can't just change overnight. Everything as a long journey begins with the first step. Webbo. Pat. Naya.
I think we're in a global community, Mr. Stanley, and modern day problems, and we seek modern day solutions. You know, for you to think that we got to go back to drive donkey cart when we talk about food security and energy, alternative energy, there's a problem there. We don't have to. You know, farming of a different type is here on island, and we see it growing in a mega way, which is great. You know, I visited a farm the other day, and it's like, wow, I can't believe the things that I'm seeing. The gentleman, and you know what he tell me? He told me don't go on the radio to say it. and no, I'm not going to call your name, but what he has there was quite inspiring, you know, and I see things happening. We just need to see more, and I see a lot of, you know, shade house being built here and there. That's the way forward, you know, in modern day approach to agriculture. It's not about, and trust me, it means nobody working there looking like they are slaves and working in the field and working too hard. These guys look like they have an easy work underneath this shade here, you know, putting some little lettuce in there, but generally nothing come without hard work, let me tell you, you know, and ears must be put in time. You must put in the time, you know, and somebody tell me the other day that Nevis people is the laziest people in the world. I disagree, but we need to be more production orientated, to be quite honest with you. We need to be more lively as it works, as it relates to our work ethics, really. And because we're going to see people doing all these things here, and we're going to say, oh, the foreigners. But the foreigners, we see the need, and so might come together and make these investments, you know. Because a friend of mine just come back from Santo Domingo, and he's telling me, he's an agriculture scientist, happens to be my brother, and he's telling me down there, it's agriculture is happening. Everybody, huge shade farms. Everybody got these, you know, like what we see happening above or below Hosford. And so that's the way forward. We're not going back and to be slaves in the field and being troubled by, you know, whatever comes from the people are approaching farming with, you know, the idea of modern day technology, making it happen. So sadly, no, we don't have to go back to donkey cat and so forth. You know, even Trump, who is against alternative energy, wouldn't say that. And so, yes, we got a long way to go, but we need to start. We need to move. We need to get on board, because we are at the end of the food chain down here, mate. Sometimes the food we get, I wondering if they're really saleable in America. And sometimes the price we pay at the pump here, I wonder, how will we survive? Because I checked myself just the other day, and I'm saying, wait, I'm spending over $1,500 a month on gasoline. What's going on here? I'm trading over $50 gas per day. You know, that seems like an awful lot. And so I implement a no drive day for myself, trying to improve on things, you know, because I say I can't be doing this. So yes, we are paying, and slowly but surely we can try to turn things around, at least limit what we have to import and use what we got, and at the same time develop expertise around here, man, you know, and getting our things happening, you know what I mean? Nobody, I would like to know a new vision, and I believe government should try to encourage in their sending off and the helping of individuals. Make sure we have people here who can establish solar, electrical connections and so forth. I know a German man here. He does it. He don't have no connection with Nivlek. You know, he's got a container, another container, have all these solar things. You know, these are the knowledge we want to have. You know, if we're talking about sustainability and, you know, going forward and things like that. Or like, you know, I don't want to hear today that there's nobody in Nevis that can operate the dialysis machine. I don't want to hear that, because we've been talking about this for 20 years. You know, somebody's supposed to send somebody away to make things more efficient for the people of my country, mate. You know, these are very serious things. Train your people. We are educated. Educated in what? These are the things you need to have knowledge of in order to impact on a brighter tomorrow, I suppose.
Well, I don't want to make any apologies for my statement in terms of we are minus third world, simply because we are on a conveyor belt, and when you make a complete comparison as to where we are with the rest of the world, that's how I categorize it.
Yeah, but Stanley,
right? Yeah. Not to be insulted, but at the same time I'm trying to bring to the fore
Dr. Bartlett,
the cost.
Dr. Bartlett, go ahead.
Yeah, but I think it's about time, though, that we recognize that there ought to be some urgency in order for us to be able to get to that point. of sustainability in whatever sustainable goal that we set. We can't always be saying, oh, we're taking baby steps. This is not the time for baby steps. Should be a wake-up call for us, especially when we recognize the external threats that are there. You know, we can't continue to kick the can down the road. Over 15, nearly 20 years now, we've been talking geothermal. We have done nothing. Maybe at this point, we ought to explore other avenues of getting renewable energy. We've been talking about food security for many years, many moons now, and we are still not halfway there. When we measure what we have done, where we are now, to where we ought to get to, we are falling short. And we have to acknowledge that. There ought to be some measure or some degree of urgency at this point in time. And if this experience, and I'm hoping that it doesn't come to that we have the disruptions that could be anticipated if Russia invades Ukraine, I'm saying that this should be a wake-up call, and we ought to put our foot on the pedal that says we're putting on gas. We're going to get to 2030. We should have all these sustainable goals, either 3/4 of the way or something. Some measure must put in place, man, but we can't always be tapping mud. You know, we're not getting anywhere. We talk about food security, and we're still vulnerable up to this day. Okay, somebody put in some plants, and you commend the people for putting in, how many plants? You said
8,000.
8,000 fruit trees. But could that sustain us? Yeah? Because they probably wouldn't come into production for the next 4 years. I don't know, what plants would have been planted, mind you know.
Yeah.
So I said, on average,
It's a good
okay,
gesture.
it is. And I'm not trying to discount it. Okay. All I'm trying to say is we need to do more. And there ought to be some urgency for us to do more, to be self-sustaining as it relates to energy production and as it relates to securing food and nutrition for our people. Because we are too vulnerable, and we've been vulnerable for a long time, and this ought not to persist.
Long time ago, I believe, let me repeat, I believe, Nevis was self-sufficient in food. Everybody had a little farm, everybody planted, everybody harvested, and as a result, I think at that time, we had food security. What happened? We still got the land hasn't disappeared. So we have to go back into production.
But when everybody was having a garden and everybody planted and so on, everybody was not working in the bank and everybody was not so on. So you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
True. I agree.
That's the last word. Finally got him, Dr. Bradley, to agree. They're making progress. This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Bart Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On Demand. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community. Talk that get results. You all have a wonderful evening.
Views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis Broadcasting Company Limited or its advertisers.